morning. Thank you for coming to our session on student transitions. My name is Kelly Brejo. I am a kindergarten to grade 12 special education needs transitions navigator with the Toronto District School Board. And we also have Miriam Riches here, who is also works for the Toronto District School Board as a special education and inclusion coordinator for K-12 as well. We will begin with the land acknowledgement. The land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. I also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaties signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. For today's meeting or presentation, we are going to be covering the following topics. We are going to be outlining the goals for planning for student transitions in the ministry document called Learning for All. We will review policies and procedures for transitions. What are transition plans? The types of transitions that students go through, home and school partnerships, financial supports, and resources, and we will be happy to answer questions at the end of the presentation. So all students who attend our schools in Ontario experience various types of transitions, including entry to school, transitions between grades, daily transitions within the school and classroom, transitions from elementary to secondary, and then from secondary to post-secondary and post-21. We know that a strong partnership between school staff, parents, caregivers, and students is imperative for successful transitions. We must plan and manage transitions effectively as they are important learning opportunities for students, helping them to build confidence, resiliency, and capacity for self-advocacy. Policies and procedures for transitions. So there is a requirement under Regulation 181/98 that students who are 14 years and older who have an exceptionality as a result of the identification, placement, and review committee process have a transition plan as part of their individual education plan, unless they are identified solely as gifted. Transition planning is an important process for all students, and particularly for students with special education needs. Principals are required to ensure that a plan for transition is in place for students with autism spectrum disorder, which is outlined in our PPM 140. Relevant ABA methods must be used to support transitions where appropriate. Students enter school from a range of settings, including the home and childcare or preschool programs. It is essential that school boards start work with parents and community agencies to plan for a successful transition. Where a student is currently working with a community service professional, that professional should be involved in the transition process. We also have PPM 156 for all students who have an individual education plan, whether they have a formal exceptionality through the IPRC, require a transition plan be developed as part of their individual education plan. On the upcoming slides, we will show you what this looks like in the IEP document. What is a transition plan? So transition planning occurs throughout the student's educational experiences, and they are developed upon entry to school, between grades, from one program area or subject to another, when moving from school to school or from an outside agency facility to a school, from elementary to secondary school, from secondary school to the next appropriate pathway. Transitions can be challenging for all students, and coordinating planning with families well before the transition helps to ensure the necessary supports are in place. Proper planning can facilitate a successful and smooth transition for the student. We have the importance of effective transition planning is The aim of that is to help minimize anxiety, insistence on sameness or routine, disorientation and confusion, isolation and withdrawal, challenging behaviors. And our goal is to increase flexibility, attention, predictability, motivation, and self-control. The following information is a part of the special education plan, which you can access through the public website. So this information is all outlined in that document, and that's a part of our resources at the end of our slide deck. And I know the slide deck will be shared at some point. So transitions are individualized, and of course, they're in consultation with the family and student where appropriate. And processes, including preschool, elementary, secondary, post-secondary, post-21, work, community, class-to-class, and activity-to-activity. They include specific and realistic transition goals and their required support needs. The actions required now and in the future to achieve the stated goals. The actions must build on the students' identified strengths, areas for growth, and interests. The roles and responsibilities are outlined, so the person or agency responsible involved in completing each identified action are outlined in the plan. And of course, timelines for implementation and or completion of each identified action are included. So this is a sample of what the transition plan looks like in the individual education plan on page 6. And in this example, the transition domain is for school entry. And the transition goal is the student will transition successfully to their new school and classroom with 1 to 2 prompts from adults. The actions required are broken down and specific. So for example, familiarize student with new staff and routines or timetables. Introduce the student to new peers in the classroom. Create a social story to support their transition. And as you can see in the other 2 columns, the name of persons for each action are outlined, and as well as the timelines for each action. The following are just a breakdown of the elements to a transition plan. So the transition goals, they identify the specific goals related to the transition domains. They should be realistic, achievable, and consistent with the individual's strengths, areas for growth, and interests. The actions required to achieve goals, they outline the specific steps needed to reach the transition goals. These steps may be student-centered, so for example, requiring the student to explore community resources, or they may be adult-centered, including a teacher, parent, caregiver, or community member who serves as a facilitator. Again, the names of persons responsible are identified for each of the actions, and then the times for implementation and completion of identified actions are outlined as well. All transition plan goals are done, again, in consultation with parents, guardians, and caregivers. We're going to move on now to types of transitions. So transitions are noted on the student's individual education plan and or individual learning plan, ILP, as either big T transitions or small t transitions. Big T transitions involve changes to the student's pathway in terms of location, school, and or program. They may involve significant change and support from adults to facilitate an effective transition. And as you could see on the previous slide, they are documented on the transition page of the IEP on page 6. Some examples of transition goals for big T transitions. Student will prepare for the transition to the world of work. Student will prepare for successful transitions to summer programs. Student will prepare for transition from elementary school to secondary school. Student will prepare to transition from an intensive support program in grade 3 to a regular class setting in grade 4. These are some transition plan examples for big T transitions. So for example, a student in grade 2 with autism is entering their new school beginning in November. A student in grade 3 with a mild intellectual disability will be taking French next year, and their classroom will be out in the portable. A student in grade 5 in a learning disability intensive support program, also known as an ISP, will be participating in math, physical education, and science with the regular class in grade 5 starting next term. Some additional examples of the Big T transitions. A student in grade 6 with an IEP will be attending middle school in September. They require significant support with changes in routine and adapting to new teacher expectations. A student in grade 8 in an autism ISP is entering secondary school to regular class with the GLE beginning in September. I'm going to be mentioning the GLE a few times in the next slides, but we will be explaining what the GLE is eventually. So small T transitions, they involve a student transitioning from activity to activity within the classroom or locations within the school or within the home. They focus on instructional strategies to be used with the student during the school day, and they are documented as an alternative page 3 on the IEP or also documented in the ILP. Some examples of transition goals for small T. Student will move independently from class to recess and recess to class. Student will transition independently during break periods, for example, during recess, nutrition break, lunch between classes. Student will transition from a preferred activity to a less preferred activity, for example, sensory play to bin work. And then some transition plan examples for the small T transitions include a grade 1 student with autism is struggling with transitioning to outdoor play. A grade 5 student is having difficulty transitioning from a preferred activity to non-preferred activity. A grade 6 student is reluctant to leave their homeroom classroom to participate in Rotary classes. So we're going to move on now to a tiered approach to transitions. So transition planning is targeted and uses a tiered approach to address context variables and individual student needs. Planning for transitions is incorporated into the program pages of the IEP with specific goals and strategies to facilitate the transitions. Different kinds of school-based transitions require different degrees of support. Similar transitions might involve a student transitioning from activity to activity within a classroom or between locations in the school. More complex transitions might involve changes to students' pathways in terms of location, school, and/or program, and may require significant support from adults. So Tier 1 are broadly held supporting common needs and are essential for all. So some examples include student orientations, welcome visits, open houses, supported completion through My Blueprint. Tier 2 are those involving increased transition actions that are more specific and are essential for some. These include the possibility of a transition meeting as applicable, or sharing of strategies between elementary and secondary schools, for example. Tier 3 would involve an increased number of transition planning actions with increased complexity and stakeholder engagement and are essential for a few. These include individual transition plans and meetings as outlined in the student's individual education plan, and for students with a safety plan, a PR 699 case conference to determine best practices for transition planning of students with safety plans to help support student well-being and safety. Now we will go on to entry to school transitions. So in alignment with programming policy and program memorandum number 11, school boards must have procedures in place to assess a student's development, learning abilities, and needs. The TDSB acknowledges that early identification and intervention help all children and lead to better student outcomes. The Toronto District School Board practices include identifying learning needs early, using effective learning methods, ongoing assessments, and keeping open communication with parents and caregivers. After enrolling in the TDSB, most students will attend their local school's regular classroom where assessment and monitoring will continue. Transition planning for entry to school. This occurs for a student who is receiving support through preschool initiatives, receiving specialized support in a preschool, childcare, nursery school, hospital program at home or through private consultants, returning from a specialized placement such as a diagnostic setting, exiting an intensive behavior intervention program, also known as IBI, to enter full-time school. And that would be a connections initiative. So connections for students can help children with autism move from community-based services, and this is delivered through the Ontario Autism Program. This is another example of, I won't read it all, but it just gives you an idea of what might be an entry to school transition plan seen in the IEP. So again, you can see the long-term goal at the beginning. Student will successfully transition into a new classroom school setting. And one of the actions may be that the student will receive a copy of new school routines to practice at home in a visual format. So for example, washroom and hygiene, outdoor play, lunch, bus rules and routines. And you can see that the responsible staff are broken down for each action item and the timeline is indicated. So for some students with disabilities and/or special education needs, which are extremely complex and who are newly registered but not yet attending the TDSB school, may, through a Special Education Program Recommendation Committee, also known as a SEPRC, receive a recommendation for placement in a full-time special education class upon enrollment. As per the Ministry PPM 149, partnership with external agencies, there are annual procedures to support successful transitions and programming for those students meeting the low incidence category of needs. And these would be students who have developmental disabilities and physical disabilities, as well as for blind, low vision, deaf of hard of hearing. That's taken from the special education plan. Some of those agencies would include Toronto Autism Services Network, Entry to School Program, supported through the Ontario Autism Programming, Connections, supporting seamless transitions for students with autism, also known as TPAS, supported through the Ministry of Children, Community and Social Services, the transition from Toronto Preschool Speech and Language Services, also supported through the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care, deaf and hard of hearing preschool programs, and also the Education Community Partnership Program, Care, Treatment, and Corrections, funded by the Ministry of Children and Youth Services and the Ministry of Health. So we will move on now to elementary to secondary school transitions. Schools across the TDSB engage in transition planning and support to ensure that all students entering grade 9 have the most seamless transitions possible, with a focus on promoting student independence in a new environment and fostering strong communication with parents, caregivers, and the community. This is a sample of a transition plan, and of course, just the importance of when students are exiting grade 8 and going into grade 9, just the sharing of information between the sending and receiving school, and of course, parent and guardian and caregiver input is a necessary part of having those successful transitions. So you can see that here there are long-term goals. There are 3 listed. And again, the actions are specific and the people that are responsible and the timelines are outlined. So additional secondary transition plan examples for big T transitions might be a student in grade 9 with a mild intellectual disability will be returning from that intensive support program and going into a regular program with the GLE in January. A student in grade 8 is transitioning from the Education Community Partnership Program, also known as ECPP, into a secondary school and regular class with GLE beginning in September. A student with complex medical needs is transitioning from hospital care into grade 10 into a physical disability intensive support program. Some additional secondary transition plan examples for small T transitions. A grade 9 student is reluctant to transition between classes when there are large groups in the hallways. A student in grade 10 in a developmental disability intensive support program requires support to safely disembark from the school bus each morning. A student in grade 11 requires verbal prompts to transition between different parts of a lesson, activities in the class. And here we have the Learning Strategies course, also known as the GLE, and there's also one called the GLS. So students with an individual education plan who are transitioning into grade 9 have an opportunity to select the GLE course. And of course, this is a recommendation from the principal if they are able to get into the course, but those students have an IEP. All students transitioning into grade 9 have an opportunity to take the GLS course without prerequisite and/or approval. And so students have the option to select the GLE or the GLS credit-bearing courses for subsequent grades. So just a little bit of additional information. So students with an IEP can take the GLE course each year, so they can take it for the 4 years. They get a credit for it. Students without an IEP can take the GLS 2 times within those 4 years. And again, they're credit-bearing courses, but they cannot be included into the average for college or post-secondary pathways. And here's a description. This course focuses, I'm just going to let somebody in. This course focuses on learning strategies to help students become better, more independent learners. Students will learn how to develop and apply literacy and numeracy skills, personal management skills, and interpersonal and teamwork skills to improve their learning and achievement in school, the workplace, and the community. This course helps students build confidence and motivation to pursue opportunities for success in secondary school and beyond. And all of the information about this course, these courses, and other courses are found in the Ministry of Education Guidance and Career Education document. We are now going to move on to post-secondary and post-21 pathways, and I believe Miriam Riches is going to take over at this point.
Thank you so much, Kelly, and thank you all for being here with us today. And yes, we will now start to focus specifically on the post-secondary pathway. So that pathway for students as they exit TDSB and move on to their post-secondary pathway. So as part of the transition plan to a post-secondary pathway, students and families really need to start thinking about post-graduation as early as grade 9. Many students may stay in school until they are 21 years of age, but we do know that the earlier we start that transition planning, the more, the better able we are to prepare them for that transition. So we know that with post-secondary transition goals, students will prepare for transitions from secondary education to either daily living, that could be a workplace opportunity, or into a post-secondary education program. Students will develop the skills necessary for transition from school to the community. They may, students will continue to explore and work towards a long-term supported living plan, and students will prepare for successful transitions from summer programs. So we are going to take some time to talk about the different pathways that are available. And as mentioned, it's very important when your student or when your child starts in grade 9 that you start to have those conversations with your student's school, or sorry, your child's school. Many of our students will go on directly into workplace opportunities after graduation. Some may go into supported day programs, while others may be involved in community support programs. And of course, some also fall into post-secondary education opportunities such as college or university. We're going to touch on each of those. There are a myriad of amazing community supports. And I think that as a TDSB, what we really want to be able to do is provide you with the support in understanding what those community supports are, when you need to start looking into those supports for your child to ensure that you access the support needed, and knowing that it can take time. So as much as these services are available, there are application processes and different assessments that need to occur, so that there needs to be time. So we've just included some here. There's, as I said, a variety of organizations. Example would be Yorktown Family Services. Most of these programs that we will speak about are funded or partially funded through the Ministry of Children, Community and Social Services. And there may be both day treatment day programs, overnight programs, various different programs that we will speak about. Next slide, please. So when we look at day programs, as I mentioned a couple of slides back, students are able to stay in secondary school until they reach 21 years of age. Or it's actually the birth year in which they will turn 21. So if they're a fall or winter child, they would actually graduate when they are 20, not 21. So it is the year in which they will turn 21 that they would graduate from our system. Next slide, please. Sorry, one moment, please. My apologies. So these are some day programs that are available throughout the TDSB or the Toronto system. And these are programs that you can certainly look into, and they would provide day programming. The day programming can be full day. Sometimes they have half day programs. Sometimes adults may attend for a couple of days a week. So there are various options, but I think really what we wanted to get across in this session, understanding this is a brief session, is that there is variety to what is available, and that there are things available that you need to start looking into. Again, some of the just further day programs, some are fee for service. So that's where you may use funding to pay for it, either private funding that you have or funding that you may access through Developmental Services Ontario, which we will speak about further in a couple of minutes. And some have funding available, so there isn't the fee attached, but there is a full list attached through the Toronto Community Resource List. So again, talking about post-secondary transitions, it is very key that you register if your child meets the criteria with Developmental Services Ontario. And Developmental Services Ontario is a service provided specifically for adults living with intellectual disabilities. This support can start as early as when they turn 16, and that's when you can start to access support. If you are enrolled in a TDSB school, we would certainly encourage you to connect with the school social worker who can help with this application process. And again, your child may only be 16 and you know they can stay in school until they're 21, but getting this process happening and getting that funding in place is really important. They can also apply for the Ontario Disability Support Program and passport funding. So that's funding that can actually start when a student or a child turns 18. So they may still be attending school full-time, but they can certainly access passport funding, which you can use then for different programming for your child. Through TDSB, we do have some adult programs. So there's many different hobbies and extracurriculars, we would call them, offered through continuing education. There is fees attached to these, but the fee is nominal, so you're certainly welcome to look through and see what's attached. They have everything from cooking or different athletic activities, aerobics classes, all kinds of things through continuing education, learning another language. There is also, and as I say, there is a small fee attached to those programs. There's adult credit programs. So for adult students who are continuing to work towards their Ontario Secondary School diploma, they may need to access further credits. They can certainly attend an adult credit program. TDSB also offers some employment support services. So that's another piece that's offered. Another pathway, and again, as I said, we would be speaking about various different post-secondary pathways. So another pathway that many of our students look into as they move through secondary school is apprenticeship opportunities. There are quite phenomenal opportunities for students to access apprenticeship trades programming, where they essentially get on-the-job training. Uh, for most of these apprenticeships, there is the requirement of 16 high school credits. So many of you may be aware that in order to get a secondary school diploma, you require 30 credits. But at the point of 16 credits, an apprenticeship can be explored. Next slide, please. There are many college programs. We're going to highlight a couple for you. So at times there are college programs that don't require a secondary school diploma. Many of them would require the diploma, but there are some offered that don't require the diploma. They do follow the timeline of applications being due the 1st of February for admission for the following September. Next slide, please. And as I said, we're just highlighting a couple of college programs. There are many more. And again, seek out your high school guidance counselor, your high school social worker to help support you in understanding what is available. There's Humber College has a program specifically for students with intellectual disabilities. It is a non-credit workplace opportunity program that they offer. George Brown offers a very similar one-year certificate program for students with intellectual disabilities in the mild range or other neurodiverse diagnoses. Once they've received either a diploma, which is the 30 credits, or a certificate, which is only 14 credits. So for many of our students, that's a pathway they will take. We've also linked an amazing resource, Connectability, which essentially has every possible opportunity post-high school. You can take lots of time to peruse that website to give you further examples. And again, I do want to highlight, we've just highlighted Humber and George Brown. Most colleges have similar programs, but it does take some time to look into specifically what your child may be interested in, geographically where you live, all of those pieces. But again, your secondary school is there to support you with this process. And again, there is the university programs that many of our students, that's a pathway certainly many of our students take when they graduate from high school. This process does start early in their grade 12 year. Applications open in October. There's the Ontario University's Fair in Toronto in October that anyone can attend and go and see all of the different booths that the universities offer. There's other regional fairs throughout the province. There's many virtual sessions. Many of the universities will also make specific stops at our high schools. And as I said, the application process opens in the fall, but it closes in January of the year before the students would start in September. Next slide, please. And then, of course, there are workplace opportunities. So we just highlighted a number of agencies within Toronto that offer either free or fee-for-service pre-employment training. So whether that's coaching around resume writing, interview skills, workshops, classes, there could be some culinary training if that's an area of interest. Part-time supported employment opportunities. So again, we've listed a number of agencies that are available to support. School-home partnership, I think this kind of takes us right back to the beginning of our presentation where we really spoke about the importance, and Kelly did a really thorough overview of the importance of that partnership between home and school. As educators, we are so much stronger in our ability to support our students when we are connected with families and with our students, and we understand how we can support, what support you need, and what further we can offer. So as I say, it's always very important to connect with your schools, ask all of the questions, request the information, understand that that they will seek this information for you and start the process with you. But certainly if you have any thoughts about your child's post-secondary, whether that be concerns or just an interest, that conversation should start early, because you do want to make sure you get any needed applications and funding in place prior to the graduation date from TDSB. Again, I think I've kind of covered this, just that importance of that collaborative support between home and school. We're going to touch just very briefly, and I recognize the next session is starting, so we'll do this very quickly. We talked a little bit about funding. There are a number of other funding opportunities that we have listed here. Ontario Autism Program, if your child happens to have an autism diagnosis, services for adults with developmental disabilities, the disabilities tax credit. Again, I strongly urge you, if these are supports you feel could be beneficial to your child, to reach out to your school and request the support of the school social worker in accessing this funding, because they can help with the form filling, even knowing where to start. Next slide, please. Again, these are just information around funding opportunities for transportation in terms of Wheel-Trans or a fare card to access the TTC. And this is just the specific information that we touched on with ODSP and DSO, and how that support can be available, as well as passport funding with the contact information, resources. And we will open it up really quickly if there's any questions, because I know the next session starts, I think, in about 2.5 minutes. And I know one person just had to sign off, but any questions, please feel free to unmute and ask those questions of us.
Hello, thank you for your information. Thank you so much. The question is, I have a 7 years old and she's going to public school. During the school time, she's scheduled for the story place for the speech therapy. I would like to ask, is there any support for the transportation during the school meeting, during the school time? For example, the school to the third part and then back to the school again, or no?
No, my understanding of, and neither Kelly or I are transportation experts, but my understanding of the transportation that is provided is just to school in the morning and at home from school at the end of the day, should the student be in a special education program or live a certain distance from the school. Otherwise, the student would be expected to get to and from school themselves. I think at age 7, it's about 1.5 kilometers. If you're further than that, you can apply for transportation. If you're closer, then the student is expected to get to school themselves. But in terms of midday transportation to and from therapies, that is not, to my understanding, something that the TDSB that our transportation is able to support, because we are a school program. We support getting to and from school, but not those back and forths to other therapies.
And another question,